The first time I saw it, I thought it was a mirage, a shimmering brand new line of 6-foot-tall cedar posts and taut black mesh fencing cutting a brutal scar across the golden, sun-baked earth of my own property. It ran for a quarter-mile, severing the access road that was the only paved route from the county highway to my ranch. My ranch. The one I'd bought for the seclusion, for the freedom, for the 200 acres of whispering mesquite and stubborn live oaks that had been in my wife's family for 3 generations. The smell of fresh-cut timber and creosote hung, heavy in the dry West Texas air, a nauseating perfume of aggression. I killed the engine of my old F-150, the sudden silence roaring in my ears. I just sat there, my hands frozen on the steering wheel, watching a dust devil dance and spin against the impossible barrier. This wasn't a mirage. It was a declaration of war, and it was signed without a doubt by the Silver Creek Estates Homeowners Association. My name is Ben Walker, retired Army Corps of Engineers. I know land. I know water rights. I know property lines down to the centimeter. And I knew, with a cold, sinking certainty that felt like a rock in my gut, that the fence standing between me and my home was not on their land. It was on mine. The memory of why we'd even sold off the 10-acre parcel to the developers 5 years ago flashed through my mind, a bittersweet ghost. Sarah, my wife, her voice soft with concern. Ben, the property taxes are eating us alive. We're not using that far corner. It's just scrub and rock. The money would secure the rest of it. For us. For the future. We'd been meticulous. The sales contract, which I'd drafted myself, included a permanent, irrevocable easement for ingress and egress along the existing ranch road. It was ironclad. Or so I'd thought. The driver's side door of my truck groaned in protest as I shoved it open. The heat hit me like a physical blow, the late afternoon sun baking the cracked leather of my boots. I walked toward the fence, my footsteps crunching on the gravel, the only sound in the vast, empty landscape. Up close, the workmanship was insultingly perfect. The posts were sunk deep into the caliche soil, the hinges on the single imposing. Gate were heavy-duty steel, and a massive master lock, shiny and new, glinted in the sunlight. A lock for which I did not have a key. A silver SUV, the kind that looks like a polished bullet, crept up the newly paved road on the other side of the fence. It stopped. The window slid down with a quiet hum. Cynthia Rothman, president of the Silver Creek Estates, HOA, peered out from behind oversized sunglasses. Her blonde bob was perfectly shellacked against the air-conditioned breeze from her vehicle, a stark contrast to the sweat already beading on my forehead. "Afternoon, Ben," she said, her voice a syrupy blend of faux sympathy and undeniable triumph. "I see you've noticed our new security enhancement." Security? The word came out flat, dead. "Cynthia, this is my easement. You're blocking access to my property. This is illegal." She offered a thin, bloodless smile. "The board has become increasingly concerned about elements using this road. It's a liability issue for the community. Our insurance provider insisted. As for the easement," she paused, letting the word hang in the air, "our attorneys have reviewed the original contract. The language is unfortunately vague. It grants access, but it doesn't explicitly prevent us from managing that access for the safety and aesthetic harmony of Silver Creek. Aesthetic harmony." I looked past her at the rows of identical sand-colored stucco mansions with red-tiled roofs, each lawn a perfect emerald green carpet, each flower bed a riot of color-coordinated petunias. Then I looked back at my land, wild, untamed, beautiful in its rugged honesty, a place they wanted to sanitize and control. "You take this down," I said, my voice low, a warning rumble. "You take it down today, or I'll have my lawyer on the phone before sundown." Her smile didn't waver. It just grew colder. "You do that, Ben, but I'd advise you to check your mailbox first." There's a notice from the HOA. Several violations that need to be addressed immediately. The unsightly storage of your vintage tractor near the property line. The excessive dust generated by your vehicle on the community's road, and I believe there's a new county ordinance about brush clearance that we'd be duty-bound to report if it's not remedied. She let the threats hang in the air, a cloud of venom. It would be a shame for this to get contentious. This was their play. This was always their play. They couldn't beat you on the big things, so they buried you in 1,000 tiny cuts. Paper cuts from a printing press that never stopped running violations, fines, and threats. They'd weaponized bureaucracy. She didn't wait for a response. The window hummed shut, sealing her in her climate-controlled pod of self-righteousness. The SUV executed a perfect three-point turn on the pristine asphalt and glided away, leaving me standing alone in the dust, staring at a locked gate on my own land. The walk back to my truck felt like a mile. The sun, the anger, the sheer audacity of it, it all pressed down on me. I drove the long way home, a 30-minute detour down a bone-rattling dirt fire road that kicked up a plume of dust so thick it blotted out the sun. Every jolt and shake felt like a personal insult. The notice was in my mailbox, just as she'd promised. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored stock with the HOA's embossed seal. The violations were even more absurd than she'd let on. Unapproved, native vegetation, mesquite scrub exceeding 12 inches in height. Nonconformist mailbox, rustic, weathered wood instead of approved bronze finish. Each violation carried a fine. Each fine would double in 72 hours if not corrected. I didn't go inside. I walked out to the back porch, the weathered planks warm under my boots. I looked out over the land Sarah had loved, the land I'd promised to protect. The setting sun set the prairie on fire, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air grew cool, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. It was a peace they were trying to shatter with their cedar posts and their legal paper. 4. 5 days, I fought them the way you're supposed to fight. I made phone calls. I wrote emails. I paid a local lawyer $500 an hour to send sternly worded letters. The HOA's attorney, a slick guy from Austin named Chad, responded with a 40-page treatise on implied covenant benefits and aesthetic uniformity, citing bylaws I'd never agreed to for a community I didn't live in. He was a master of obfuscation, burying the simple, brutal truth. They had fenced off my legal access under a mountain of legalese. My lawyer sighed during our third conference call. Ben, they're banking on you running out of money and will before they do. They have a war chest funded by every homeowner's dues. This is what they do. We can sue, but it could take years. And in the meantime, you're using a goat path to get home. I stood at that damn fence every evening, watching the Silver Creek residents drive through my gate without a second thought. They'd wave sometimes, a little flick of the fingers from the air-conditioned comfort of their Lexuses and Land Rovers. Their obliviousness was its own kind of insult. The breaking point came on a Friday. I'd gotten a quote to drill a new well because the old one was failing. The well guy, a good old boy named Dale, took one look at the fence and the terrible road he'd have to take and doubled his price. "Sorry, Ben," he said, spitting a stream of tobacco onto the dust. "That road'll shake my rig to pieces. Can't do it for less." I was beaten. They were winning. I stood there, leaning against the hated fence, the rough-hewn cedar digging into my forearms. I watched Mrs. Gable in her pink jogging suit power walk past, followed by a man in a golf cart meticulously inspecting each lawn for any blade of grass out of place. And that's when I saw it. Not with my eyes, but with my mind. A memory from 20 years ago, a dusty classroom at Fort Belvoir, a lecture on civil engineering and public right-of-ways, an obscure, almost forgotten principle. In Texas, a road, even a private one, that has been used openly and consistently by the public, for years can acquire a status known as a prescriptive easement. But the inverse is also true. If a private entity blocks a previously open access point, especially one that has been used by the property owner for decades, they aren't just trespassing. By locking that gate, they had effectively made a conscious decision to control the access. And with control, under a very specific and often overlooked state statute, comes potential liability and a very different set of legal responsibilities. They hadn't just illegally blocked me. By turning my easement into their controlled entry point, they had, in the eyes of the law, potentially assumed ownership of the burden of maintaining that access for everyone who had a right to it, which was, primarily, me. A slow, cold smile spread across my face for the first time in weeks. They wanted to control the access? Fine. Let them control it. Let them own it. Every single inch of it. I drove into town, not to my lawyer's office, but to the county clerk's archives. I spent the next 8 hours buried in dusty, leather-bound folios and microfiche machines that smelled of ozone and old paper. I wasn't looking for a way to tear the fence down. I was looking for a way to make them regret they'd ever built it. I found it. Buried in a 1972 county ordinance regarding the maintenance of private roads that service multiple parcels, there was a clause. A beautiful, elegant, and brutally powerful clause. It stated that if a property owner with deeded access was willfully impeded by the controlling entity of the road, said entity could be held financially responsible for all damages and costs incurred by the impediment. But it was the next sentence that made my heart skip a beat. And said controlling entity may be considered to have established a toll road and must provide reasonable access upon payment of a reasonable toll, to be determined by the impacted party's actual costs or by a court of law. They'd turned my access into their security gate. The law, in its infinite wisdom, said that if you man a gate, you're running a toll booth. The next morning, I was at the hardware store before it opened. I bought a folding table, a metal cash box, and the biggest, most official-looking placard I could find. I went home, fired up my ancient computer, and designed a sign. It was simple, professional, and devastating. Silver Creek Estates Toll Road. Access fee, $25 per vehicle. Payable to Ben Walker Ranch Maintenance Fund. County Ordinance. To a 15, compliant. Payment is required for passage. Trespassers will be towed. I had it printed on a weatherproof vinyl banner at a shop in the next town over. I bought a heavy-duty stanchion and 2 traffic cones for good measure. The following Monday at 7 a.m., as the first of the Silver Creek commuters approached their new security gate, they found it still locked. And they found me. I'd set up my folding table on my side of the fence. My sign was displayed prominently. The cash box was open. I sat in a camp chair, wearing my cleanest jeans and a shirt, sipping a thermos of coffee, the steam mingling with the cool morning air. The first car was a BMW sedan, driven by a man in a suit who I recognized as a member of the HOA board. He rolled down his window, expectantly waiting for me to open the gate. I didn't move. "Morning," I said, my voice cheerful. "That'll be $25. He stared, uncomprehending. "What? What are you talking about?" "Open the gate," gestured to my sign. "New policy. This is now a private toll road, county ordinance. $25, please. Cash preferred." His face cycled through confusion, then dawning horror, then pure, unadulterated rage. "You can't be serious. This is our road. This is our gate." "Actually," I said, my voice dropping into a calm, steady tone I'd used to de-escalate situations in far more dangerous places than West Texas. "The road sits on my easement, and that gate is on my property. You put it there. You control it. Therefore, by the power vested in me by Pecos County Ordinance 72-15, you are operating a toll road. The fee is for the maintenance and inconvenience your illegal obstruction has caused. Now, are you going to pay, or would you like to turn Around and take the 30-mile detour? He sputtered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He grabbed his phone. I knew who he was calling. I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. The game had changed. They just didn't know it yet. Where are you watching from? Comment your city right now, because this story is about to show you exactly what happens when a retired engineer with nothing left to lose decides to fight back. And trust me, the HOA's reaction. You won't believe what they did next. The cruiser's tires crunched over the gravel, kicking up a cloud of fine white dust that hung in the still morning air like gun smoke. Sheriff Earl Hayes cut the engine, and the sudden silence was heavier than the heat. He adjusted his wide-brimmed hat, his movements slow and deliberate, the way men move when they're trying to drain the tension from a room before they even enter it. He didn't look at the line of luxury cars idling on the other side of the fence, their drivers' faces pressed against windows. He looked only at me, sitting at my flimsy folding table, the toll road sign flapping gently in the dry breeze. "Ben," he said, his voice a low rumble, worn smooth by 30 years of small-town disputes. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. "Sheriff," I nodded, not getting up. The metal chair was already warm against my back. The smell of coffee from my thermos mixed with the scent of diesel exhaust from a waiting pickup truck. He hooked his thumbs into his gun belt and let his gaze travel from my sign to the cash box with a few 20s neatly tucked inside to the imposing HOA gate with its gleaming lock. "Got a call from Cynthia Rothman. Says you're extorting her homeowners." I kept my voice even, calm. The kind of calm you learn not in peace, but in the eye of the storm. "I don't believe that's the case, Earl. This is a simple matter of civil contract law and a county ordinance. They blocked my deeded access. The ordinance states that by doing so, and by manning the access point, they've effectively established a toll road. I'm just collecting the fee they've obligated themselves to." Earl sighed. The sound of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Ben, you know I can't parse that legal mumbo-jumbo. All I see is a fence and you asking for money to open it." From the other side of the gate, a man in a BMW leaned on his horn, a short, furious blast that shattered the morning quiet. A mockingbird, startled from a nearby mesquite tree, took flight with a scolding chatter. Earl didn't even flinch. He just stared at me, waiting. Most local law enforcement's hands are tied in civil property disputes. They can't determine the legality of an easement or a county ordinance on the spot. Their primary concern is preventing a breach of the peace. If both parties have a plausible claim, the sheriff's job is to de-escalate and tell them to take it to a judge. They can't order me to stop collecting a toll any more than they can order the HOA to tear down the fence. It's a legal stalemate, and the first person to commit a real crime, like vandalism or assault, loses. "I have every right to be here, Earl," I said, meeting his gaze. "I'm on my property. They are the ones who have illegally obstructed a right-of-way. I'm operating within the county's framework to seek restitution. If Mrs. Rothman has a problem with that, she's welcome to file a motion in court. Until a judge tells me differently, this toll booth is open for business." Earl studied me for a long moment. He'd known me for 20 years. He knew I wasn't a hothead. He knew I did my homework. He also knew the bottomless well of spite a bored HOA board could draw from. Another horn, longer this time. A woman's voice, shrill and furious, cut through the air. "Arrest him, Sheriff! He's holding us hostage!" Earl's jaw tightened. He turned slowly toward the sound, his posture shifting from weary mediator to something harder. "Ma'am," his voice carried, clear and firm, without raising a decibel, "I'd advise you to be patient. This is a civil matter. I am not a judge." He turned back to me. "Ben, I can't make you leave your own land, but I will be parked right over there." He pointed his chin toward a patch of county road shoulder. "Until this is resolved. If this escalates, if there's so much as a raised voice, I'll start writing tickets for disturbing the peace. Understood?" It was a draw. but a draw against an HOA with a lawyer on retainer felt like a victory. "Understood, Sheriff. Thank you." He gave a curt nod, walked back to his cruiser, and did exactly as he said. He parked 50 yards away, a silent, watchful presence. The line of cars on the other side of the gate seemed to deflate. Their sheriff wasn't going to rescue them. The man in the BMW, Mr. Henderson, finally got out of his car. He was red-faced, his expensive tie looking like a noose. "This is outrageous. I have a multi-million-dollar merger meeting in 30 minutes. "I understand your frustration, sir," I said, my voice dripping with a politeness so sharp it could draw blood. "The fee is $25, cash or Venmo." He stared at me, then at the sheriff's cruiser, then back at the 30 miles of dirt road that stood between him and his merger. With a sound of pure disgust, he pulled out his wallet, slapped a 20 and a 5 on the table, and snarled, "Open the damn gate." I made a show of making change, counting the bills slowly into the cash box. Then I stood, walked to the gate, and turned the key I'd had made after picking the HOA's laughably simple lock on the first night. The gate swung open. Henderson peeled out, spraying a shower of gravel from his tires. One by one they paid. The angry ones, the silent ones, the ones who looked almost embarrassed. The cash box grew heavier. Word must have spread, because soon residents started appearing on foot, cutting through the scrubland to see the spectacle for themselves. They stood in little clumps on the HOA's perfectly manicured roadside, phones held aloft, recording. I was no longer just a nuisance. I was dinner theater. This went on for 3 days. The HOA's response was a blizzard of paper. Every day my mailbox groaned under the weight of new violations. Unpermitted commercial activity, operating a toll booth, creating a public nuisance, visual blight, folding table and signage. The fines were astronomical, climbing into the thousands. I added them to a growing pile on my porch, next to the rocking chair where Sarah used to sit. Each notice was a tiny pinprick, but my anger had calloused over. They were playing checkers. I was learning to play chess. My tactical edge wasn't just in ordinances, it was in observation. From my folding table, I saw everything. I saw the landscaper's trucks, which according to HOA bylaws had to be unmarked, sporting magnetic signs. They slapped on and peeled off the second they were out of Cynthia's sight. I saw the weekly beer delivery to the clubhouse that was absolutely, according to their own rules, a violation of the No Commercial Deliveries clause. I saw the Rothmans' own pool maintenance guy dump chlorinated water into the storm, drain that fed into a dry creek bed on my property, a clear EPA violation. I took notes. I took pictures. I built a dossier of their hypocrisy. The break in the stalemate came from an unexpected ally. Mrs. Gable, the power-walking widow in the EI. Pink jogging suit, she approached my table one afternoon after the rush had died down. The sheriff was still there, a permanent fixture now, reading a newspaper behind the wheel. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice quiet. She smelled of lavender and nervous sweat. "Ma'am," I said, "the toll is for vehicles. Pedestrians go free." She offered a thin, worried smile. "It's not that." She glanced over her shoulder toward the rows of perfect houses, as if afraid of being overheard. "It's about the annual HOA budget meeting. It's tonight. Cynthia, she's proposing a special assessment, a $5,000 fee per household, to cover, and I quote, unexpected legal expenditures." I leaned forward, my interest piqued. "Legal expenditures? To fight me?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "She's telling everyone you're a dangerous squatter, that you're threatening her. She says the HOA needs a war chest to protect property values. But I've seen you. You're just sitting here. And I saw the original easement documents. My late husband was on the planning committee. He always said that road was yours. This was it. This was their vulnerability. Cynthia wasn't just fighting me. She was financing her war on the backs of her own people, using fear and lies to shake them down. She was overplaying her hand. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Eleanor? Eleanor Gable." "Eleanor, thank you. This is very helpful." She nodded again, wringing her hands, and Power walked away, a flash of pink against the green lawn. I knew what I had to do. The budget meeting was at the clubhouse, a sprawling Mediterranean-style building with a fountain out front. It was for homeowners only. But the bylaws, which I'd read cover to cover, stated that all membership meetings were to be held in a place accessible to all members. By locking the gate, they had made the clubhouse inaccessible to me, a member of the association by virtue of my easement rights. Therefore, according to their own rules, the meeting was invalid unless held at an accessible location. I packed up my toll booth an hour early. I drove the brutal dirt road home, my mind racing. I showered, put on a clean pair of jeans and a button-down shirt, the uniform of a reasonable man, and prepared to crash a party. The clubhouse parking lot was full when I arrived. I'd parked on the county road and walked the last 100 yards, my boots silent on the warm asphalt. I could hear Cynthia's voice before I saw her, amplified by a microphone, echoing from the open doors. She was in her element, and that is why this parasitic lawsuit from Mr. Walker represents an existential threat to everything we've built here at Silver Creek. He doesn't care about our community. He wants to tear it down, to drag our property values and our quality of life back into the mud. I stepped into the doorway. The room was packed with 70 or 80 people, all facing a stage where Cynthia stood behind a podium, flanked by the other board members. A projector screen showed a pie chart of the proposed budget, a massive slice labeled Legal Defense. The air was cold, over-air-conditioned, and smelled of cheap coffee and expensive perfume. The room fell silent as people near the back noticed me. A wave of turning heads, followed by whispers. Cynthia stopped mid-sentence, her mouth slightly agape. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Good evening," I said, my voice cutting through the dead air. I didn't need a microphone. "Sorry I'm late. There was a gate blocking my access." Cynthia found her voice, sharp and shrill. "This is a private meeting. Get out." I took a few steps into the room, holding up a printed copy of the HOA bylaws. Article 4, Section B. All membership meetings shall be held in a location readily accessible to all members. By illegally blocking the only reasonable access road to this facility, you have made it inaccessible to me, a member with deeded rights to this community's infrastructure. This meeting is therefore out of compliance. Any votes taken tonight are invalid. Chaos erupted. People shouted questions. Some yelled at me to leave. Others, I noticed, stayed silent, watching Cynthia with new eyes. HOA bylaws are a contract, but they are also a shield for the board, granting them power. The key to breaking that power is to prove they are not following their own rules. A meeting held in violation of its own accessibility clause is a procedural nightmare. It opens every decision made there to legal challenge. It proves the board is acting in bad faith, which can be grounds for their removal. I wasn't just disputing offense. I was challenging their very authority. Cynthia's face was a mask of fury. "You are not a member. You are a litigant. The easement makes me a stakeholder with membership rights pertaining to the use of this road," I fired back. "But we don't have to debate that here. I came to talk about your proposed assessment." I turned to address the room, to the frightened, confused faces of my neighbors. "She's asking you for $5,000 each, to fight me. But has she shown you the actual lawsuit? There isn't one. Not yet. She's asking for a blank check to fund a war she started by building a fence on my land. Ask her how much she's already spent on that fence. Ask her how much her attorney Chad bills per hour. Ask her if that fee includes the cost of him writing up violations for my non-conformist mailbox, while she lets her own landscapers violate the commercial vehicle policy every Tuesday." I saw heads swivel towards Cynthia. I saw doubt hardening into anger on their faces. They could tolerate pettiness, but they hated wasting money. Cynthia was sputtering, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling around her. "This is a lie. He's trying to divide us. Security! Call security!" But no one moved. They were all watching the show. The HOA president, the picture of controlled perfection, was coming undone right in front of them. I pressed my advantage, my voice dropping, becoming more conversational, more reasonable. "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to get to my home without a 30-minute off-road rally. You all bought homes here because you wanted a certain kind of life. I get that. But is this the community you signed up for? One where your president can waste your money on a personal vendetta? One where you get fined for your mailbox while she breaks county environmental codes?" I let the question hang in the chilled air. I'd said my piece. I turned and walked out, leaving a room boiling over with unrest behind me. I was almost to my truck when I heard the quick click of heels on pavement behind me. I turned. It was Cynthia. The facade was gone. Her face was twisted with a rage so pure it was almost terrifying. The lavender twilight cast long shadows hollowing out her cheeks. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I will bury you. I will spend every last cent of their money to see you broken and living in a ditch." It was the threat of a cornered animal, desperate and ugly. I didn't answer. I just got in my truck and drove away. The victory felt hollow, fleeting. I had exposed her, turned her own people against her. But I had also unleashed something far more dangerous. I had humiliated her. And a humiliated enemy, with nothing left to lose, is the most dangerous kind of all. As I bounced down the dirt road toward the dark outline of my ranch, a single chilling thought followed me. The fence was just the beginning. The real war was about to start. What would you have done when she threatened you like that? Would you have backed down? Or would you have dug in, knowing it was about to get so much worse? Comment below, because what happened next, it changed everything. The silence after Cynthia's threat was louder than any engine roar. For 3 days, the fence stood. The gate remained locked, but no one came to pay the toll. The line of cars on the other side vanished. The only signs of life from Silver Creek were the distant, glinting reflections of sunlight off binoculars from upstairs windows. They were watching, waiting. The air itself felt charged, thick with the ozone smell of an impending storm. My temporary victory at the meeting had been a spark in a dry field. It had lit a fire, but I'd underestimated the wind. Cynthia's. Retaliation wasn't more paper. It was a siege. On the 4th morning, I found the first one. Nailed to a fence post on the county roadside of my property, away from the HOA's view, was a dead jackrabbit, its body arranged in a grotesque, deliberate pose. A crude sign hung around its neck. "Trespassers will be shot." The metallic scent of blood mixed with the dust. It was a message, primitive and vile. My skin crawled, not from fear of the act, but from the madness it implied. This had escalated from petty tyranny to something darker, more unhinged. I didn't call the sheriff. I took pictures, my hands steady. I bagged the animal and buried it deep under the live oak where Sarah's ashes were scattered. The earth was cool and forgiving under my hands, a stark contrast to the hate left on my fence post. The next day, my well pump gave a final shuddering gasp and died. The mechanic I called found the cause immediately. "Ben," he said, holding up a handful of fine, glittering sand. "This is industrial abrasive media. Someone poured this down your wellhead, trashed the pump, probably fouled the casing. This ain't no accident." The cost to repair it was more than the toll money I'd collected. They weren't just trying to bankrupt me with fines. They were sabotaging my very ability to live on the land. The taste of dust in my mouth felt permanent, a constant reminder of their campaign to dry me out, to force me to abandon my home. I sat on my porch that evening. The silence of the dead, well, a physical weight. The sunset was a bloody smear across the sky. I thought of Sarah. I thought of the promise I'd made. And for the first time, a cold, focused rage began to burn away the frustration. This was no longer about a gate. This was about survival. My military training took over. Observe, adapt, overwhelm. They thought I was a lone man behind a folding table. They didn't understand that they had cornered a strategist. I went back to the county archives, but this time, I wasn't looking for ordinances. I was looking for ghosts. I pulled every permit, every plat map, every environmental impact statement filed for the Silver Creek Estates development. I spent days in the dusty, silent room, the only sound. The hum of the microfiche machine and the rustle of century-old paper that smelled of time and neglect. And I found it. The developer's original application for the community's central water feature, a man-made pond beside the clubhouse. The application was approved, but the attached surveyor's map, signed and sealed, showed a crucial error. The pond and a significant portion of the land it sat on, including the ground under Cynthia Rothman's prized rose garden, was not part of the original HOA plat. Through a convoluted surveying mistake, that sliver of land had never been officially deeded to the HOA. It was an orphan parcel, and under Texas law, if no one holds title to land, and the adjacent property owner makes use of it openly and continuously for a set period, the legal doctrine of adverse possession is often misunderstood. It's not just squatting. It's a complex process of claiming title to land by proving exclusive, continuous, open, and notorious possession for a specific period. In Texas, 3 to 5 years under certain conditions. But a more immediate and powerful tool is the boundary by acquiescence and estoppel principle. If a property owner knowingly improves or maintains land they believe is theirs, and the true owner doesn't object for years, a court can permanently grant them that land. The HOA had been maintaining that pond and that garden for over a decade, but if they didn't own it, then every dollar spent, every rosebush planted, was a potential liability. They had built their kingdom on a fault line, and I had just found the trigger. But I needed more. I needed to prove Cynthia knew. I remembered Eleanor Gable's husband being on the planning committee. I paid her a visit, not at the fence, but at her home, approaching from the county road. She answered the door, her face pale with anxiety. "It's gotten worse, hasn't it?" she whispered, ushering me in. The house smelled of lemon polish and fear. "It has," I said. "I need your help, your husband's papers, anything from the early planning days of Silver Creek. There's a mistake, Eleanor, a big one, and I think Cynthia knows about it." Her eyes widened. She led me to a study filled with cardboard boxes. He kept everything. He said one day someone would need it. We spent hours digging, and then, in a box labeled Phase, one correspondence, we found it. A letter from the surveying company to the developer with a carbon copy to the planning committee. It was a warning, dated 12 years ago. It explicitly pointed out the minor discrepancy in the parcel boundary near the water feature, noting it was of little practical consequence, but should be cleared up with a quiet title action to avoid future issues. Paper clipped. To it was a handwritten note on the developer's letterhead. The signature was the developer's, but the writing was sharp, angular, and unmistakably Cynthia Rothman's. It read, "Ignore. Fixing this will delay Phase 2 sales. No one will ever know." She had known. For 12 years, she had known the HOA was trespassing, and she had covered it up to protect sales commissions. It was fraud. I had her. Not just on a petty violation, but on a crime that could dissolve the entire HOA's claim to their central landmark. I made copies. I stored the originals in a safety deposit box. The final showdown wasn't in a courtroom. It was at the next emergency HOA meeting, called to approve the legal defense assessment. This time, they'd moved it to a rented hall in town, a pathetic attempt to sidestep my accessibility argument. It didn't matter. I walked in as if I owned the place. The room fell silent. Cynthia at the podium looked gaunt, her perfect composure cracked around the edges. She saw me, and a flash of pure panic crossed her face before it was smothered by fury. "I'll have you removed!" she shrieked. "On what grounds?" I asked, my voice calm, carrying to every corner of the room. I held up a single piece of paper. "I'm here as a concerned stakeholder to discuss item number 1 on your agenda, the illegal expenditure of HOA funds to defend against a lawsuit that wouldn't be necessary if you hadn't committed felony fraud." You could have heard a pin drop. I walked toward the front, my boots echoing on the linoleum floor. I didn't look at the homeowners. I kept my eyes locked on Cynthia. "What are you talking about?" A man in the front row, another board member, asked, his voice trembling. "I'm talking about the man-made pond, the rose garden, the land your HOA has been maintaining for 12 years that you don't own. I'm talking about a letter from the surveyor and a note from Ms. Rothman instructing the developer to ignore the error because no one will ever know." I turned to address the room. She knew. She knew the HOA had no legal right to that land, and she hid it. Every dollar you've spent on its maintenance is a misappropriation of funds. Every fine she's levied to pay for her attorney is an attempt to cover up her crime. She's not protecting your property values. She's protecting herself from going to jail. I threw the copies of the documents into the air. They fluttered down like leaves. People scrambled to grab them. The room erupted into chaos. Cynthia stared, her mouth working soundlessly. The facade shattered completely, revealing the terrified, cornered woman beneath. Her allies on the board shrank away from her as if she were contagious. This is nonsense," she finally stammered. But the life had gone out of her voice. It was the desperate, hollow protest of a player who knows the game is over. A woman stood up, her voice shaking with rage. "You told us he was a squatter. You told us he was dangerous. You asked us for $5,000 to fight him, and you were just covering your own—" The rest of her sentence was lost in the roar of angry voices. The crowd turned on Cynthia, not with quiet doubt, but with the fury of the betrayed. I didn't stay to watch the feeding frenzy. My work was done. I walked out into the cool night air. The stars were brilliant, sharp diamonds in the vast blackness, above the town. The scent of rain on the wind washed away the taste of dust. The fallout was swift and absolute. Cynthia Rothman resigned the next day. The HOA, facing a lawsuit from its own members and a criminal investigation from the county, voted to settle with me immediately. The fence was torn down, not by me, but by a work crew paid for by the HOA. My legal fees were covered. The fines were erased. The road was mine again, more firmly than ever before. But the true victory was quieter. It was the smell of fresh earth, as I repaired the damage to my well. It was the sight of the open road, unobstructed, leading home. It was the wave from Eleanor Gable and a few other neighbors, a gesture of peace, of a community reclaiming itself from a tyrant. One afternoon, a week after the fence came down, a flatbed truck arrived at the HOA. I watched from my porch as workers, under the supervision of a new chastened board member, dug up Cynthia Rothman's prize-winning rose bushes. They were loading them onto the truck to be moved, to return the land to its natural state until its true ownership could be determined. The air was filled with the rich, loamy smell of upturned earth and the faint, sweet perfume of torn roses. Thought of Sarah then. I thought of her love for things that grew wild and free. I walked inside and took her favorite vase from the shelf. I went out to the fence line, to the place where the gate had been, where my folding table had stood. I knelt down and dug a small hole in the hard soil with my hands. I planted a single resilient stalk of prairie verbena I'd found growing near the dry creek bed. It was a small purple splash of defiant native life against the repaired earth. It wasn't a grand gesture. But it was a promise kept. The land was healed. The silence was peaceful again. It was over. This wasn't just my story. It's a story for anyone who's ever been pushed around by someone who thinks rules don't apply to them. They rely on your silence, on your fear, on your belief that you're outgunned. But the law is a tool, and sometimes the biggest hammer is the one they never saw coming. Where are you watching from? Comment your city below, because corruption like this is happening in neighborhoods everywhere. Your story could be next. If you believe no one is above the law, hit subscribe. Like and share this with someone who needs a little hope. And if you want to see another unbelievable takedown, click here. The next one involves a zoning board, a protected wetland, and a very angry flock of geese. You won't believe what happened.